This is a summary of Chapter 3 in the Codependency Anonymous book. The chapter is called A Suggested Program of Recovery, and it gives some very, very specific homework to do, and part of that is grieving our losses. So I'm going to start, and I'm not going to read everything word for word, but I will give an overview. So, if we attempt to complete these steps alone, we may perpetuate isolation, a common codependent behavior. In time, many of us seek the loving help of those who have traveled this path before us, sponsors in Coda, who can offer us insight, encouragement, and support. They help us see that these steps cannot be completed quickly or absolutely. They are not quick fixes. The 12 steps steer us from a path of self-defeating behaviors toward healthy and loving relationships with God, ourselves, and others. They offer us growth, a priority for our relationships, and a guide for living healthy and loving lives. Through their simplistic nature, we can discover who we are and how to become involved in healthy, loving relationships. The steps help us to see how our past experiences of abuse and neglect have formed and reinforced our codependent behaviors and lifestyles. We learn how to turn over our self-claimed power, addictions, and problems to a loving higher power. We give our lives, will, and healing into the care of that higher power. We become accountable for our codependent behaviors, which reinforce patterns of devastation in our lives. We grow in humility as we learn of our own shortcomings and defects of character and recognize our skills, talents, and successes. From this humble state, we do all within our power to right our wrongs. We also try to complete the work which helps heal our wounds and perhaps those whom we have hurt. In our step work, we strive on a daily basis to maintain accountability for our own behavior. We learn to strengthen and deepen our relationships with our higher power. We rely more freely upon our higher power from our true value, worth, and well-being. Finally, we realize if we want to keep what we've gained through our step work, we must strive to pass on the experience, strength, and hope of our recovery to those who still suffer from codependence. Our journey through the steps may be the most difficult work we ever attempt, yet the rewards and the healing we receive cannot be measured in time. The steps become an integral part of our daily lives as we practice these principles in all our affairs. Listed below are the 12 steps which are the suggested program for Codependency Anonymous, and I'm going to skip over those, and I am going to read this portion that really is helpful. So we're going to look at step 2, which helps us to identify our lifetime of experiences, feelings, and behaviors to pinpoint how we avoid, control, and manipulate ourselves, other people, and circumstances. We learn how we've become our own higher power or placed others in that role. We begin to see that God has not given us the right to control another person's behavior, but we have been given the responsibility to set limits and boundaries for ourselves with others. To explore how we control and avoid ourselves and others, we search our personal histories. We ask ourselves the following questions to see if they apply to our lives. And I will list these questions in the notes of this video so that you'll have them in writing if you want to look at those and journal later. But I am going to read them to you. Number 1, what neglect and abuse did I experience growing up? Number 2, where did I learn to turn my head when I and or other people were being neglected or abused, and why? Number 3, who in my childhood displayed these behaviors or instructed me not to tell or share my feelings about it? Number 4, where did I learn that avoiding others was safer than being involved? Number 5, Where did I learn to control others for my sense of well-being? Number 6, how did I learn that I wasn't good enough or was better than others? Number 7, when, where, and how did I learn to deny my own thoughts, feelings, and needs for the sake of others, or conversely, to demand that the world revolve around me? Number 8, how did I know never to tell the family secrets and why? Number 9, where did I learn to behave in neglectful and or abusive ways that are intellectually, emotionally, physically, sexually, and or spiritually harmful? Number 10, where did I learn to express these behaviors, which are often communicated in the extremes from silence to violence? Number 11, how did I learn to allow them to be expressed towards me? Number 12, where and how did I learn that having a relationship would make me whole? Number 13, did I learn these things through others' words or actions? If so, whose? Number 14, how did I come to survive life through codependent behaviors rather than living life through a sense of freedom? And last, number 14, what are my true feelings about all of these questions? By answering these questions, we gain an understanding of how our powerlessness developed in our childhood. But knowing this is not enough. We must see the unmanageability of the codependent behaviors we carry into our adult lives. To explore our unmanageable adult codependent behaviors, we find it helpful to review the first chapter and its outline of the denial, low self-esteem, control, compliance patterns. And there is a video for chapter 1. It's a questionnaire of how denial, low self-esteem, control, and compliance patterns show up in your life. So if you want to review that, it will help you to understand your patterns, which are represented in adult codependent behaviors. It's important to be honest with ourselves to change our unmanageability. By exploring the powerlessness of our childhood and the unmanageability of our adult lives, we come to understand more and more about our personal heritage. Our denial of codependent facades, our acceptance increases, and we're better able to see our destructive adult behaviors. It is extremely important to remember that our first step is not to be used to assign blame to others or to ourselves. We're not on a witch hunt. By holding on to blame, we react codependently and remain powerless. Rather than blame, we attempt to review our childhood and adult experiences that are the root of unhealthy behaviors. We acknowledge how powerlessness and unmanageability developed in childhood and gradually manifest themselves in our adult behaviors and relationships. We accept that our lives get crazier the more we try to control and avoid ourselves and others. Rather than blame others or ourselves, we become accountable for our feelings about our childhood and adult experiences, as well as our progressive adult codependent behaviors. We find it helpful to list the losses we've experienced in our childhood and adult life. We allow ourselves to grieve these losses, the pain and anger we've held on for so long. As we release these feelings, we begin to release the energies that drive our codependent behaviors. We see that our codependent behaviors of manipulation, control, and avoidance have only left us in despair. Many of us share our first step with our sponsors and friends in recovery. We share our past experiences, losses, and grief. In doing so, we begin to release the emotional depths of our powerlessness and unmanageability. Once we do, we can begin to accept our past, think more positively, and act in healthier ways with ourselves and others. By understanding and accepting our codependent powerlessness and the unmanageability of our lives, we open the door to possible solutions. We admit that our best efforts in these areas have failed and that we need greater help than our own limited abilities can provide. From this position of admission and acceptance, we are ready to reach for help of a power greater than ourselves to restore us to sanity. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Came to believe, in the beginning, we came to believe by attending meetings and listening, we heard others as they described a relationship with a higher power. We noticed that those who maintain a regular connection with this power experienced what we sought, recovery, because we were members of a 12-step program. The form of this power was left to each of us to discover. We became willing to entertain the possibility there was something that could do for us what we could not do for ourselves. I'm going to repeat that. We became willing to entertain the possibility that there was something that could do for us what we could not do for ourselves. That's important. Restore us to sanity. With the help of others in the program, we began to look more clearly at our own behavior. We discovered a great truth in step 2, that continuing to act in a self-destructive manner, no matter how well-meaning we believed we were, was insane. And once this behavior became compulsive, any belief we held that we could control it on our own was equally insane. We become honest with ourselves. Becoming honest with ourselves was at times painful. The reward was magnificent. As we came to believe and embrace the simple and profound truth offered in this step, the seed of humility produced by our admission of powerlessness in step 1 was nurtured. We experienced a sense of freedom and hope by our willingness to have a true higher power. At this point, our faith emerged. So what this is saying is that you have to learn interdependence with a higher power and with other people. In step 1, we recognize our failure in our own attempts to play God. We've also allowed others to be our God. We recognize that we must seek help beyond ourselves and those to whom we've given authority. In doing so, we become ready to develop a belief in a power greater than ourselves, a power that can restore us to sanity and health. In step 2, we begin establishing or strengthening this belief. For those of us who do not know a higher power, we embark on a new and wondrous relationship. For those of us who have a relationship with the higher power, this step can help us strengthen its weaker areas. Through our work in the first step, we learn that as children, we may have prayed often for God's help, but neglect and or abuse continued. So basically what this is saying is we cried out to God and He didn't answer us. The authority figures in our lives were often unavailable and absorbed in their own addictions and codependence. As adults, we try to leave those circumstances behind, only to find ourselves in adult relationships where similar or extreme opposite behaviors occur. We keep praying to God, but nothing changes until we turn away from our addictions and from the people with whom we're obsessed. And I'm going to put a plug in here. When you hold resentment towards somebody and bitterness, you're obsessed with that person. So you have to let go of that. We may continue to look to others for solutions, peace, hope, and our sense of identity and worth. We begin to feel more worthless because our humanness won't allow us to be our own higher power, or we give that power to others. We are left with few choices. Only one offers us the freedom, strength, and serenity we so desperately need. Some of us come to Coda already believing in a loving God. We may feel God's loving presence through hardship or believe that God abandons us in times of need. Many times, shame causes us to believe we're not good enough to warrant God's love, goodness, or grace. Some of us have little or no concept of a higher power, or we may have forgotten or abandoned our learned concept of God. A review of chapter 1 and 2 can help us clarify our concept of a higher power in our childhood. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 will be uploaded, and you can review those again after listening to this chapter. Our higher power may have had personality traits similar to authority figures. At times, God may still resemble a punishing or shaming person, like a tyrannical spiritual leader, family member, or friend. We find it helpful to list the personality characters and traits of a higher power with whom we do have or would like to have a relationship. This can help us determine if we have transferred personality traits and characteristics from our former or present abusers to our higher power. To better understand these concepts, we talk with others in Coda and learn from their experiences. Some people choose nature, the universe, or their home groups of Codependency Anonymous as their higher power. Others choose renew or strengthen a belief in a higher power of religious convictions. We learn how they struggle just like us, and how they experience many miracles in their lives and relationships with God and others, often in spite of their doubts and fears. We learn of their spiritual discoveries and how God works in their lives, even when they ignore God's presence. We learn how their lives are restored through faith and even divine intervention, sometimes in the face of life-threatening circumstances. For some people, placing faith in a belief in a higher power may be difficult because it means letting go of illusionary safeguards. It means believing or being willing to believe that a power greater than ourselves can do for us what we're unable to do for ourselves. We remember we're being asked in step 2 only to believe or be willing to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. We're not required to believe in another person's personal God, religion, or spiritual concept. Our higher power must feel right and safe to us. Our higher power must be one of our own choosing and concept. As we begin placing our faith in this renewed or newly established relationship, we begin to feel relief and a new sense of hope. We no longer need to control or avoid ourselves or others. We begin placing this relationship first to gain the strength and peace necessary to maintain recovery and live life rather than survive life. In step 2, we experience a newfound faith and responsibility. Our higher power does not accomplish our recovery work for us. We must do our share. Every day we must attempt to renew and strengthen our relationship with our higher power and share our newly fortified experience, strength, and hope with other codependents. With the help of a loving higher power, we are now ready to begin step 3. Step 3 is, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. We made a decision. We admitted our powerlessness over the compulsive behaviors we had practiced for so long. We were beginning to believe a higher power could relieve them. The next step was obvious. If we believed we were powerless and that a higher power could transform us, why not accept it? Why not give God a chance where we had failed? Besides what we did, we have to lose but our misery. Okay, so that says, besides, what did we have to lose beside our misery? So basically what it's saying is, I've tried doing it my way and it hasn't worked, so I might as well try something different. What do I have to lose? Our will and our lives. Our old ideas called out to us to return to self-will. Once again, we attempt to play God in our lives and the lives of others. Old doubts sometimes challenged our new way of thinking. We begin to believe that even though this program worked for others, we were different. Losing hope, we questioned our ability to change. I've been there. You start to believe that recovery isn't possible because your old ways of coping keep manifesting themselves and it's really hard to overcome. It was this experience that led us to acknowledge that this program of recovery was not a flash in the pan, something nice to do on a pleasant afternoon. It represents our opportunity to live as whole human beings. And if we wanted it, we would need the willingness to go to any lengths, even if it meant asking God for help more than once. Codependents have a propensity for trying to be perfect, and when perfection isn't attained, it's easy to get very discouraged. So in this step, we continue to develop and strengthen our relationship with God. We pause to read this step and what it suggests we do. We reflect upon its wisdom and our feelings about surrender. We are asked to make a decision to let go of ourselves and others. And that is so hard. We decide whether we can trust in God to care for all we consider precious and important. Trust does not come easily for many of us. For years, we put our faith and hope in ourselves and in others. We relied on everything but our higher power to provide us peace, happiness, and well-being. Control and avoidance have demanded a great deal of our time, attention, and energy. We know we've abandoned ourselves and given others power over our well-being. Some of us pray and hope that God will help, but until we let go on a heartfelt level, our codependence continues. Through our work with steps 1 and 2, we realize that our control and avoidances no longer work, and that others are no longer responsible for our happiness and well-being. We realize We realize how our playing God or giving the power of God to others is short-lived, painful, and ultimately self-destructive. We gain a better or new understanding of a power greater than ourselves. Until we turn our emotions and our attention to God, we are still bound by our codependent thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We may be frightened by the thought of allowing God to take care of us and the other people in our lives. What if God doesn't do what we think is best? What if things don't go the way we would like? What if they don't change? What will happen if others don't like us as we change in recovery? As codependents, our fears are understandable. They lie beneath our intense need to control and avoid ourselves and others. In letting go of control and avoidance, these fears often surface as we are emotionally faced with our spiritual dilemma. Once we face these fears, we are at a crossroad. Do we return to playing God in ours and others' lives, or do we turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understood our God? We remember that we are asked only to make a decision. We are not asked to instantly experience total faith and trust in God. Our ability to trust in healthy ways has more than likely been negatively affected by the codependence in our lives. We cannot expect to make this decision without some reservation and fear. To cope with our fears, we ask God for courage and strength. We seek the support and understanding of our sponsors and recovery friends. Some of us may create a special time and place to complete this step. In any case, when we are ready, we may find this prayer to be helpful. God, I give to you all that I am and all that I will be for your healing and direction. Make new this day as I release my worries, fears, knowing that you are by my side. Please help me to open myself up to your love, to allow your love to heal my wounds, and to allow your love to flow through me and from me to those around me. May your will be done this day and always. Amen. When we make this decision, our fears, concerns, and reservations subside, and our relationship with God grows. Our trust grows stronger by continuing our recovery work and experiencing how God helps us to change our codependent behaviors. We feel a healthier sense of well-being. Our tendency to control and avoid others and ourselves decreases as we progressively release our control and avoidance behaviors and refocus our attention and energies on our own personal recovery. We're not as overwhelmed by life's circumstances. We experience a growing sense of serenity. We more effectively release the lives of others to the care of God as well. We may not realize how dramatic the changes have been in our lives and circumstances because they're so often subtle. They happen day by day, and we may not see them. A review of just how far we've progressed over this past month, 6 months, and years can reassure us of God's continuing presence and care. We may experience circumstances when we think God cannot or will not help. We may revert to our former codependent survival patterns if we look closely. We find that fear, shame, or fear of shame are at work once again. We can walk a path towards serenity again by praying for God's help and guidance, talking with our sponsors and recovering friends, and reviewing these first 3 steps. Day by day, we strengthen our relationship with God. We become more responsible for our recovery by placing this relationship first. Every day, we find it helpful to review our decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. As we continue to do this, our trust in God grows with our higher power's help, the program of codependency, or CODA, and the care and support of our sponsors and recovery friends. We can strive for a life of balance, strength, and serenity. Having brought an end to our spiritual dilemma, and having developed a growing trust in the loving care of God as we understood God, we are ready to begin the healing of our relationship with ourselves. And step 4 begins this healing process, and I will record step 4 in another video. Thank you for listening.